let's dig in to the 4 traps of certainty. These are the traps that minimize innovation, create disengagement in your people and work, and create a situation where we're missing tremendous opportunities to find solutions, ideas, new opportunities, new paths that are going to move yourself and your work and your business forward. So let's dig into them so that you can avoid the 4 traps. So let me just say hi, I'm Tamara Gondor. I'll tell you a little bit about myself so you know the perspective I'm coming from. I'm a pioneer of the human-centered innovation field. I believe very strongly that we are all everyday innovators. In fact, research, science, and work prove it. And people-first innovation is how we move forward. It combines neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and 25 plus years of work and experience to build a fresh approach to innovation that works. I'm the creator of the proprietary Innovation Quotient Edge assessment, sought after globally. It's the only tool to help people discover their unique style and strength of innovation, as well as the online toolbox that helps people ignite innovation daily. People purchase that to get tools, inspiration, ideas to bring their everyday innovator style to life. I'm the author of 2 best-selling books, Innovation is Everybody's Business and Think Sideways, the host of a top-rated podcast with Tamara Gondor, where I interview everyday innovators from across the globe who are out there pushing boundaries, thinking differently, solving problems, and making an impact in their world, which, oh, by the way, if that's you, I would love to interview you. Reach out. I'm an advisor to leading Fortune 500 organizations on fostering innovative ideas, building innovators, and solving their biggest challenges. And I'm an award-winning keynote speaker to the world's largest associations, conferences, and client meetings. I get to travel the globe. And of course, as a kid in computer camp, I won the I'll Try Anything Once award, which is a motto I pretty much still live by. So let's dig into the 4 traps of certainty. The 4 traps of certainty. The first one is, it's only for certain people. You know, the mad, crazy innovators or the ones with the purple streaks in their hair and the funky glasses, but only for the people that we deem as these incredible creative minds and innovators. The second one is that it's only for certain times. And either that's a time of crisis or that 3 p.m. brainstorm with the scented markers, but we only innovate in those specific scheduled times or moments. Is that it's for certain segments. It's the marketing, the R&D, the innovation department. But if you're in administration, operations, product management, well, that's not for you because it's only for certain segments. And the 4th trap is it's only in certain processes. It's certain initiatives. It's the checklist that we have to follow to drive innovation. It's only a specific way that we have to do things to drive innovation. Now, here's the challenge with all of these that you probably see. When we see innovation and we fall into these traps of certainty of people, segments, time, and process, here's what happens. First of all, we end up not leveraging a tremendous amount of untapped potential. If it's only for certain people or certain times, we're leaving a lot of untapped potential on the table. It minimizes that responsibility of innovation to a small percent of your work or your business. So missing out on a large percent. If innovation is only for 5% of the time that you're working or 5% of the people, well, that's 95% that you're missing out on. That's in terms of people, times, and areas of job. It actively creates disengagement and a lack of motivation, possibly in yourself, definitely in your teams. When people feel like they can't creative problem solve, strategic think, make decisions in the work that they do, when they can't be innovators, they feel disengaged and they feel unmotivated. They feel undervalued and not heard. And when we fall into these traps, we're not fully realizing opportunities, solutions, and ideas that could drastically move yourself and your business forward. We're not seeing them, we're not creating them, we're not capturing them, because we're relegating innovation to the 4 traps of certainty. So let's talk about each one specifically and what that trap causes, the downside of it, and a little bit of a shift in mindset that I'd like you to consider to avoid the trap, or if you're in it now, get out of it. Because here's what I've learned in my years. Thriving businesses and leaders know that innovation happens across the entire business and with everyone from the front lines to the C-suite. And a real culture of innovation starts with all people being everyday innovators. I've worked with many teams and organizations in my 25 plus years, and I can tell you firsthand that the teams that see themselves as innovators, regardless of their title, job, length of time, years of experience, but everybody sees themselves as innovators, those are the companies that are doing well in uncertain and changing times. So let's dig in. So trap number one, certain people. It's, Susie with the purple streak in her hair, who's always got that mojo, or it's, Greg, who just exudes creativity, or it's that person who's got the special title, VP of ideas. They're the innovators, but not the rest of us. So here's what happens when we fall into the trap of certain people. First of all, here's the downside. We validate this very false belief that we, as the person not that certain part of the certain people group, that we don't have it in us. So hence, we don't innovate. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that way. So all of us who aren't part of the certain people group become task takers because we're not innovators. The other downside is we abdicate responsibility of innovation to someone else, judging our own perceived lack of abilities. Because when we abdicate that responsibility, right, we're giving it to somebody else, we're basically at the same time saying we don't have it in us, even though time and time again, science, research, and my work has proved that we all have it in us. We minimize or miss the opportunities and the solutions that are right in front of us. So when we're waiting for somebody else to be the innovators, when we've abdicated that responsibility, we stop seeing those hot spots of innovation that are actually right in front of us. We stop very short of reaching our full potential and realizing the satisfaction that comes with being an innovator. Think of it for a minute. Let's just take it to a personal example. Doesn't it feel good when the garage door breaks and you kind of figured out a creative solution to it, like you MacGyvered it, you jerry-rigged it, or if like you're having a challenge with your car, but you kind of figure out a solution? You know what I'm talking about. Maybe those examples aren't you, but you know what I mean. When we solve something creatively in our day-to-day lives, it actually releases feel-good chemicals in our brain. So when we don't innovate, when we don't accept and responsibility of being innovators, realize that potential inside of us, we're actually missing this possibility for the satisfaction and joy that comes from those solutions, that comes from creative problem solving, from being an innovator. Now, as an organization, you're missing tremendous untapped potential and ideas that could move your business forward. If only 5 out of 100 people are innovating because they're the certain people, well, that's 95 people who are not bringing forward ideas. And you better believe they see them. They're in the work every single day. And here's the other thing. Usually, and oftentimes in organizations I've seen, it's reserved for leadership. Well, here's what happens when those certain people are only the people at the top of the organizational chart. Emerging leaders leave or feel undervalued and don't bring their voice forward. So certain people, being all the VPs and directors, are the ones who get to innovate, but the rest of us, because we don't have all the knowledge, experience, et cetera, we don't have that opportunity. Well, it makes us feel undervalued and not heard, so we leave, or we don't bring our ideas forward. Innovation is accessible to all and the responsibility of everyone. It's for the people that live and breathe their work every day. You, me, the people we work with, we're in the best position to innovate with what's right in front of us. So to avoid this trap of certain people, we've got to get into the mindset and the behaviors that innovation is for, and everybody is accountable for it. All right, the second trap is certain times. So usually that's a brainstorm with scented markers and blank easel pads, right? And we're all expected to shuffle in after having kind of kept our head downs and just buried in the weeds for the last 4 days of work, or maybe the last 10 years of our career, and have this magical genie come out of a box. And it usually doesn't happen. So this idea that innovation is for certain times not only misses the mark in the sense of all the other times you could be innovating, but it actually makes innovation harder, more exhausting, because we've been keeping it dormant, and then we're expected all of a sudden for it to be this super strong skill that we all have. So the downside of certain times is that we falsely expect this magical innovation genie to come out of a box in 60 minutes, and we end up disappointed or frustrated, or like feel like we're wasted time, because that's not what happened in our 3 p.m. brainstorm with scented markers. People aren't warmed up or ready to innovate, so the ideas that we do get are status quo or incremental, not what we need to move the needle forward. And let's do the math for a minute. If we're only innovating for 2 hours a week, like that's our brainstorm time or our kind of town hall meeting time or our kind of like meet in the hallway to innovate time, we're actually leaving out the remaining 32 hours. I think you get the point. Whether you work 40, 50 hours a week, you're part-time, whatever it is, you get what I'm saying here. The math just does not add up, not if you really want to drive innovation. And it actually drives down innovation those other 32 hours where there's tremendous opportunity for innovative thinking and ideas, because we're saying that innovation is only for that brainstorm, only for those moments. And the other thing I'd like to say on this, it's not on the checklist, but I think it's important to just point out for a minute, because I've seen this more so recently, is the other time that we say is appropriate to innovate is during a crisis. Now that's true, right? When we are facing disruption and massive change, we need to innovate. But saying that we have to be in a crisis or in a time of massive change, like something is forcing us into innovation where we wouldn't have before, means that innovation becomes synonymous with crisis. And good innovation happens all the time. There's always room to innovate. Because as you've seen from the definition of innovation, thinking differently about what's right in front of you to create an advantage, that innovative idea could be a different way to do your workflow, to manage your team. It could be a new product in the marketplace or a marketing campaign. It could be a new business model that's going to help you distribute your products and services in a new way. That's not just in a crisis. So it's a real shame if you think that innovation and crisis have to go hand in hand. Crisis obviously helps. Pressure is not always a bad thing, but innovation happens all the time. The other thing is, when at certain times, is it turns people into task takers or list checkers for the remaining hours of the day. So this is kind of what I mean by it drives down innovation, because if we think the only times to innovate is when we're like solving that big problem at the 3 p.m. brainstorm, well, the other time we become task takers and list checkers. It's human nature. We want to open that up and not minimize innovation all the time, so it really could be possible. The other downside is it assumes that only the people in the room are the innovators, and that's excluding the other stakeholders. And what that does is it tends to decrease buy-in and traction. So if you invite 6 people to the room and it's a cross-functional team, and don't get me wrong, we need to get together, we need to have discussion, we need to have the right people sitting at the table having the right conversations. But if that's all we do to drive innovation, all the other people that are impacted by those brainstorm moments don't feel included. So buy-in goes down and traction goes down. Innovation happens with what's right in front of us all the time. The best ideas happen when we are in the work, not in the conference room. It's what creates creative problem solvers, not task takers. When we think of ourselves and the ability to innovate as something that we have in front of us all the time. Okay, the third trap is certain segments: marketing, R&D, innovation. We all have those departments, those segments in our companies where we see innovation just bubble up all the time. It's expected, it's part of the job. The challenge is when that department or that segment is the only one, what we're really doing is we're not giving permission to innovate to everybody else. Again, missing major opportunities to drive your business forward. All those other places have just as much room for innovative ideas and solutions than the ones that we deem as the quote unquote creative departments. When we make innovation only part of certain segments or departments, we actually disengage the people in the remaining departments. They become order takers from the innovators in the company. Here's what I've actually seen happen, and this is my next point here, is that it labels departments as the other department in the organization, right? So, and here's what I've seen. It's like a one-way tennis match. So the groups that are quote unquote innovative, marketing, innovation, R&D, they get an idea, they decide to do something, they bounce that idea, tennis ball over the fence. And on the other side, nobody wants to play tennis with them because they're not the innovators, right? They haven't been a part of the process, or because they have no room to innovate, they don't want to take on the work or the pressure that you're putting on them to bounce that idea forward. It's a one-way tennis match. So it labels other departments in the organizations as places that don't need innovation, which again, we're missing major areas of big improvement across the organization. And it creates separation between departments and people, minimizes collaboration, buy-in, and traction. So that separation is what I'm talking about with a one-way tennis match. If the team in marketing are the only ones that get to be creative, I might applaud their work, but when they bounce something over to me, well, why should I be a part of that? All it means is more work for me, but yet my contributions aren't valued. So it creates a this department versus that department environment. That toxicity doesn't lead to strong ideas. And it turns innovation into new products, clever marketing, or creative research. And that delivers minimal innovation solutions that actually create breakthroughs. Those things might be great, but we're missing major opportunities. Hotspots of innovation are possible up, down, and sideways on the organizational ladder. Leader companies innovate across the business, not in specific departments. Okay, and the final trap of certainty is certain processes. It's like we sign on to the latest and greatest innovation process. We hand everybody the playbook and say, this is how it's going to be done. Follow these things. We have certain guidelines for our brainstorm session, certain checklists that everybody has to follow. Are you getting exhausted listening to me? Yeah. Here's what happens when we relegate innovation to certain processes is we create initiative fatigue with our people. It's yet another initiative, another checklist, another process that they have to follow. And we all have many that we have to follow. And it tends to fail because most people don't see their place in the process or how their contributions drive innovation or even achieve team or company goals. So you've got a new initiative or a process of innovation form. It could even be a good one, but if I don't see how I contribute, if I don't see myself as an innovator, why would I buy into the process or even use it? I get, let's call it a dozen calls easily a year from companies, leaders who call me and say, okay, so we launched this new innovation initiative with XYZ, process of the month, and it's not working. Nobody's doing it. Why is that? Well, this is why. It creates a weighted out mindset in your teams as they hold out for the next initiative change. How many of us have been there? It develops a culture of innovation that relies on outside process versus the innovation abilities of your people. This is why it never lasts. Initiative fatigue, wait it out. It's yet another process I have to follow. I have to learn to even be able to apply it. And I don't even have time for that right now. So when organizations fall into the trap of certain process, what ends up happening is wasted time, resources, and money for a process that has lack of buy-in and doesn't get traction. Process first innovation fails. People first innovation succeeds because people feel valued. They understand how they contribute, and it provides them with a sense of connection to the team and the greater organization. I know my innovator style. I know how I contribute. I understand how you contribute. Together, we can collaborate and win. It not only builds me as a stronger innovator, but it builds a stronger collaboration because I understand how to tap the power of the diversity of thinking in the group versus all of us trying to follow a one-size-fits-all process. So those are the 4 traps of certainty: certain people, certain times, certain segments, and certain processes. I hope in digging into these, both in the original lesson and in this video, that you get a sense of why it's so important to pay attention to these traps, to avoid these traps, and how you can think differently to drive innovation that really moves you forward.